Welcome back, everyone, to our Thursday Q&A show. Today, we're going to be talking about overcoming food cravings from the power of your heart. So, as someone who has overcome cravings and still get cravings myself, I'm talking about here, I'm very passionate about sharing a whole new way of experiencing freedom in your daily eating, how food can really be not only enjoyable, but truly nourishing, because I know what it's like to feel really trapped into patterns and really relying on food for so much more than food has to be. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you some research and evidence-based tips and tools and strategies that have honestly helped me so much in this evolving journey around food, which for those of you that have been with me for a long time, over a decade, will know that I started my wellness journey with food because I had such a challenging time with food, everything from my weight to bloating to eating disorders, the whole gamut, which I will share with you today. Very excited to support you in this way and all the different ways in which heart-led living and wellness can truly elevate your life around our four cornerstones: food, body, emotional well-being, and spiritual growth. Reminder that you can ask me questions for this show on our website, mysaluna.com. There is a Feel Good podcast link where you can submit your questions. Also, while you're over there, be sure to join our newsletter to stay on top of all our amazing offerings. We have offerings around all our cornerstones. We have more heart-led living courses and materials coming out. We have our digestion-focused supplements. We have our Glowing Greens powder. So much over there. So please be sure to check it out. Once again, at mysaluna.com. I'll also mention that the new heart book is out, The Hidden Power of the Five Hearts. So please be sure to check it out when you can. It is all about heart-based living, my practical guide through the 5 stages of awakening your heart to experience more vitality, more emotional resilience, stress resilience, energy, peace, and more. Okay, let's go into our food cornerstone today. Our question comes from Barbara. Barbara, thank you so much for bringing this topic to our attention. I'm very passionate about talking about food and food cravings because now that I'm on the other side, more so, I still have a lot of chocolate cravings that come up from time to time, certain things, but I'm so grateful for tools and strategies to help me that I did not have for a long time that I really want to share with you today. Barbara asks, "Hello, Kimberly. I love the podcast. I have a hard time with my eating habits as I tend to eat poorly when I'm stressed, upset, or feeling anxiety. What causes this and how do I break these habits?" Barbara comes to us from New Hampshire, over New England. Barbara, once again, thank you so much for being in our community. And I know that many people relate to these issues around food. And so I thought, before we get into the research, I thought I'd start by sharing a little bit about my journey and how it's shifted and changed across time, including during my pregnancies and post. I'll give an abbreviated version, of course. So I really didn't understand how to deal with a lot of my anxiety growing up. I was a perfectionism. I put a lot of my worth into my grades and my achievements. I was the president of my high school. And I ended up outlaying, let's say, projecting a lot of emotional baggage, shall we say, into food. And at first, I tried not to eat very much because I wanted to be thin. And when that didn't work, because I was so hungry and I was on the track team and I was running a lot and training, I was also on the swim team, I ended up having a period of bulimia where I would eat and feel guilty. So then I'd say to myself, well, I'm already eating. Let me just eat more. And sort of stuffing my feelings down, particularly with a lot of, it wasn't even sugar. It was a lot of like croissants and like bread with lots of butter on it and things like that. And I came to realize later, and it's funny because as we grow, some of us in our healing journey are led to actually really explore things that have been challenging for us, which was my journey. And I even wrote a book about food cravings. Some of you may have read it. It's called The Beauty Detox Power. And it was my third book, and it was coming on the heels of writing about all these incredible beauty detox foods and foods for beauty, and really, nourishing your hair and your skin. And it was around this point in my journey. This was a bit about 8 years ago, where I started to really realize how it's like onions of, you're peeling away onion layers, and there's so much underneath. And whilst I'd been teaching people about beauty and vitality, there is this aspect that was really starting to come forward in my life, which was this emerging interest in spirituality, an emerging interest into the unseen parts of us, especially emotional well-being. This is where our four cornerstones have really stemmed from, my personal experience. And so I started to write about the different food cravings and how they were attributed to different emotional states. I was seeing this in the clients I was working with, and I was definitely seeing it in myself. So if you delve into that book, one of the cravings is high fat. This is where we really want not just say candy, but ice cream, things that have a lot of fat in them, or in my case, butter, because fat can feel stabilizing when our lives feel out of control, where there's a lot of whirlwind of activities. In my case, there was lots of tests. I was studying for the SATs. When I became bulimic, there was just a lot of things. Things felt, there was a lot of pressure, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Another craving that I had in high school was pretzels. I loved crunchy things. I loved to crunch down. And in my research, I learned that having this crunch in your jaw, which can hold a lot of tension, and there's actually a piece of fascia that runs from your jaw all the way down your neck, your spine to your lower back. It's one piece of fascia. So I remember having a lot of back pain as well, feeling like I was holding the weight of life on me. And when I would eat these crunchy foods, it's like a cathartic release. So the bigger thing to realize around food cravings as we get into the research is that everything is energy. So when we have unmet needs, and particularly in the case of we're not meeting our need to digest emotions, to feel these emotional energies and to let them pass through us, it's going to come out in some way or another. Sometimes it comes out through our body's pain, aches. Sometimes it comes out through acne. Sometimes we just develop a lot of stress inside of us, which can manifest as hair loss, as inflammation. Sometimes in my case, it just becomes really aggressively about disordered eating, stuffing myself, purging. It was a really intense time that actually took up a lot of time. The eating, the throwing up, the hiding the throw up, the cleaning it up when no one was around, the shame of feeling the secrecy of all of this, just a lot of heaviness bound up in it. And then later, I, came into healthier eating, but I had to really work on the other end, which is paying more attention to nourishing myself again, particularly after my pregnancies, when so much of my attention was on my children and I was just giving them so much and breastfeeding so much. There was another period of really feeling like I needed to replenish myself, and not just through chocolate, which started to really rise up because maybe the bliss chemicals and just the feelings of chocolate started to become quite prevalent, and I had to balance that. And where I am today is feeling pretty balanced. I'm aware I still do like crunchy things. I still have crackers and things that help me relieve stress, but there's a lot more awareness and I have a lot more tools. And these are some of the tools that I want to share with you today, particularly around the power of the heart. Now, when we're talking about the heart, if you've been around for some of my podcasts, especially the last few months with the release of the new book, there's so much I've learned about how the heart is another brain and how this relates to food cravings. is that so many of these patterns around reaching for the cookies when you're feeling stressed, or getting the pizza as a tool, like a reward at the end of a workday, all these really ingrained patterns tend to be very mind driven, very linear, very up in our heads. If we can start to connect with the power in our hearts, what happens is we start to feel and intuit when we're starting to get into a stress response. And instead, we can start to create more coherence, harmony inside of ourselves. We can learn to ground ourselves through the heart aligned meditation, of which there's free tracks on the website, myselena.com. There's a lot of other tools in the book as well. We start to feel the power of the heart bringing us into this present moment. And we hear a lot about presence, but most of us aren't really present, right? We're on our phones, we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about what we're going to eat, we're replaying things in our mind. When we really truly become present in our hearts, it's this deep, grounded experience, and we start to be more aware of what we're feeling. Now, there's a practice in the book called the Heart Aligned Steady in Life practice, which is dealing with big emotions, that has been instrumental in me overcoming food cravings. So there's a lot more detail in the book, but basically we're coming into heart coherence. We're slowing down, taking some nice deep breaths while we focus on the heart. We're shifting into a coherent state. We can self-generate appreciation, which is a mix of thankfulness and gratitude. And then we can breathe through while we are aware and experiencing the deepest of emotions, including overwhelm, resentment, jealousy, anger, irritation, frustration, sadness, grief. And it's in this digestion that we are able to allow the energies through us without pushing them down. It is my experience that in pushing down emotions, they end up coming up and out again through issues with the body and or food cravings. In fact, a 2007 study in the Journal of Physiology and Behavior found that chronic stress increases cortisol levels, which can lead to cravings for high fat and high sugar foods. So there's a lot of research that continues to come out around this topic, but I don't see a lot of actual tools for handling it, which I want to go circle back to in just a moment. But first, a 2010 study in the Journal of Frontiers in Psychology found a strong association between negative emotions, such as sadness, anxiety, and anger, and emotional eating, which usually equated to consuming large quantities of food in response to negative emotions. So one of the things that I tried along my journey was keeping a food journal. And this can start to create awareness. We can write in our journal what we ate when we were stressed, or what we ate in a particular day, or what was going on. But it was my experience that this didn't really take me to an actual solution. It did create some awareness, but it also created some guilt, to be honest. I would look back at my food journal and I remember feeling to myself, wow, you have such low willpower. I can't believe you binged again. How did you do this? And there was just so much darkness in those times. As I look back, I can now really see with so much compassion that I didn't have tools for dealing with these big emotions. And the truth is that as I continue in my work and my research and conversations with so many people, the truth is many of us don't have these tools. So let us share a little bit, let us discuss a little bit more about how the power of the heart can help you in times when you feel these big emotions, which often equates, whether we realize it or not, as we start to build this awareness, though, we can see that whether it's in that immediate moment or it builds up and up through your day, and the moment comes at the end of the day where we end up turning to food to self-soothe. So what we hear about a lot in our society is stress management, trying to reduce stress after we've already gone into the stress response. The problem with that, though, is that this research study I just mentioned talks a lot about cortisol. When we're already in the stress response, there's already going to be a certain level of hormonal imbalance. We're already in the cascade. We're already in the stress waterfall where different activations are already put into place in the body. 2 minutes of irritation puts into motion about 1,500 different biochemical processes that ultimately drain our energy. So what's more effective, and then we're trying to backtrack, and then we're trying to clean things up, and then we're trying to shift things. What's more effective is creating a different pathway, avoiding the stress response in the first place, which I believe is a very powerful mechanism for avoiding stress eating. Right? It's not going to get, we're not perfect. We're human. It doesn't mean we're never going to eat things for emotional reasons. I still do, but it's way, way less. I would say, 90-95% better for me. And there's still times, and I recognize those times and I don't beat myself up because we are all human and we're all on this journey. So what if we have some stress eating? But it does matter if we're feeling controlled, if it's actually contributing to health issues, or as this research study says from the Journal of Neuromage from 2010, found that individuals with heightened brain responses to food cues are more likely to gain weight over time. And also a 2008 study in the Journal of Eating Disorders found that childhood experiences affect emotional eating in childhood. So we can become free at any point, no matter what happened in our past. Myself, who had eating disorders in my teens, if you've had disordered eating patterns in the past, we come into this present moment, we come into the heart's power. And why the heart is so brilliantly powerful and helping us to shift is that the heart sends more messages to the brain than vice versa. So once we start to really understand this, then we can start to harness this energy and we can start to take more control over our experience, our perceptions, our thoughts, and our patterns. So, for example, let's be quite tangible here. Let's say that an email comes in. Let's talk about a stress pathway. And the email is bumping up a deadline, telling you that this project that you thought you had a month for is now due in 10 days or a week. And you start to feel in your body, your heart rate increasing. You start to sweat. Maybe your coffee is sitting next to you. You take a couple sips. You start to panic. Your mind starts to race. In these moments, think about what you might usually do, what most people usually do. They keep going. They don't digest those emotions. They push them down. They reply right back. They start to work faster. Hurry energy starts to come in, right? So we're not really using self-care to create emotional well-being. We're just moving through, which is sort of what Western culture is about. Pedal to the metal, keep going. Right. It's no wonder anxiety is such an epidemic today. What it could look like using heart-led living. And then later on, that would contribute to maybe chomping down a whole bunch of chips at lunch, scarfing down a candy bar, being up late that night with insomnia, worrying about the project, watching Netflix for 3 hours, eating a pizza, right? It's just these energies in the body, which we haven't really been taught to adequately digest, similarly to how we must properly digest our foods. So what it could look like instead is that email comes in and you start to be aware that something is dysregulated in the body. Something has dysregulated you. There's a faster pace to your heart. Your thoughts are starting to spin. There is a feeling of sickness or heaviness in your stomach. Maybe your shoulders start to hunch up. Just start to be aware of the different cues that a stress response has been initiated in your body. For me, there's a lot that gets processed through my tummy. So I start to feel kind of this steeliness or sickness in my tummy. And I know that's the sign that I've been dysregulated. So, what we would do from the heart perspective is you would shift your attention to your heart. You would forget about everything else for a few seconds. If you need privacy or space, you would go to the bathroom. If you're in a cubicle, or if you're home alone or working alone, whatever, shift into your heart. This is the best time you can spend. You can even place your hand on your heart. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start to take some nice, deep breaths in and out of your heart while focusing on your heart. Not just deep breaths while thinking the thoughts, but focusing on your heart. This will start to change the input signal to your brain. Now, if you want more information about this, once again, there's a lot more detail in the book. And I also suggest that you watch or listen to my podcast with Dr. Roland McCready, Director of Research from the Heart Math Institute, where we talk about this input signal shifting. And then what you could do in that moment, you could do one of the more specific tools like the Heart Aligned Steady in Life, or you could simply feel an emotion that you would want to call in, like peace. And you would breathe it in into your heart, peace, and you would exhale out, and you would just allow a couple moments to regulate yourself while this intense feeling of overwhelm or stress or fear or upsetness or anger at your boss or whatever it is move through you. And it's really simple. It sounds really simple, but yet there's an incredible amount of science behind what I'm sharing with you. It's this ability to hold space for ourselves so that the energies in motion, the known as emotions, this moving energy, is actually able to digest. And so you're pausing. It's like you're slowing down life, allowing yourself to come into more coherence. Now, as you do this, you start this syncing up process between your heart and your brain and your nervous system, so that taking those few minutes allows you to now come back into life, into addressing the email, and into inspired action, which could look like responding to your boss and saying, actually, to get the work properly done, I would need a few more days, or looking at your schedule and shifting things around so you could allot more time to this particular project, shifting your, things around in your overall general schedule, whatever it is. But you could approach the situation with calmness and clarity instead of the stress response, which will disable your body and ultimately create food cravings. Now, another practice that you could do is before you eat. Many of us have micro moments of stress and buildup that we don't even recognize. It could be, your dog chewed up a little bit of furniture and you're holding that tension in your body, or your child was extra fussy getting into his or her car seat and it was just a really hard mom morning or whatever it is. So what we want to do is to become more coherent before we eat. And so that way we will help to flush through energies, allow food to be more about self-care and nourishment. It will allow us to prevent overeating and just be in more harmony with our true needs. So before we eat, let's say you're sitting before your plate of food, you would look like this. You just take a couple deep breaths. You can place your hand on your heart, sink down there, and take a few seconds to feel and experience appreciation, not just running through a mental gratitude list, but to actually feel true appreciation for a loved one, for the food that's in front of you, for the sunshine, whatever it is. But when we feel this fullness and true appreciation in our hearts, we are turning on a different source of true, sustainable fulfillment and groundedness from inside of us. And this is a very different experience for many of us, including myself in those early years, where I was grasping for food to feel grounded. I was grasping at that high fat butter to make me feel really in my body. I was grasping at croissants, which tasted really good, to have a feeling of fulfillment because I wasn't able to give myself that feeling of fulfillment. And we often misplace these these incredible energies that we can self-generate. We can learn to do so from higher heart coherence within ourselves into not only foods, but other people, situations. We only can feel certain things if we're watching our favorite show, or we're eating our favorite food, or we're with our puppy, or with our child, or with best friend, whatever it is. Instead of starting to step into more true freedom of understanding that we actually have the power to give these energies to ourselves. It's so profound, and it will start to build. So some of these simple practices I'm sharing with you, the more you do them, you build what's called your coherence capacity, your baseline. So now you will start to get less triggered into emotional eating over time. It will start to feel less strong. It will start to happen less often. Now, consistency is needed. So ideally, you would do the heart aligned meditation, which is under 8 minutes, a few times a week. You would learn about more of these tools and strategies in the book, and you would simply employ some of the simple tools that I've given you here today. Why? Because as I mentioned, your heart is another brain. So what we're doing here is we're really talking about neuroplasticity. We're talking about creating a different pathway, which Yogananda, the great yogi who brought yoga to the West, talked about decades before neuroplasticity came to be a scientific, well-proven theory that we can rewire, we can create different systems and patterns all the time. So instead of being a slave to food cravings, instead of the same impetus, the signal going off in your amygdala, and we immediately reach for the Hershey's bar or the Subway sandwich or whatever it is that we find ourselves constantly going to, we create a different pathway. We go to the heart, we regulate ourselves, we start to feel calm, grounded, peaceful, fulfilled from inside. And now it's less the desperation of going to food because we have so many other tools, and namely the power of our hearts. Now, another important aspect of overcoming food cravings is to create a really positive environment around us to support us and to make this more easeful as we are switching over into more heart-led living and eating. This is something my friend Dan Buettner talks about. He's talking about longevity and setting up a blue zones culture where our friends are eating healthier and our kitchens are set up with fruit out on the counter and more healthier choices. So this is really important to consider as we are strengthening ourselves and creating different pathways. A 2015 study in the Journal of Behavioral Sciences examined the impact of social factors on eating behavior and found that emotional eaters were more susceptible to social cues, especially what their friends were eating and during social gatherings. So you could share this work with loved ones, with those you live with at home, with friends, to just help support you, or maybe to also join you in removing the donuts from the conference rooms all the time. So it's not as easy for you to go into those patterns, maybe to have conversations around healthier options like, I'm just throwing this out there, but gluten-free crackers with some delicious vegan cheese, or some beautiful cut up fruit, or some veggie sticks with hummus, or whatever it is. You could start to create shifts in your work environment and also your home environment. Maybe you share with your roommate or your husband or your partner. I'm really struggling right now. Do you think we could just keep the ice cream out of the house for a little while? Or can we just take the cookies off the counter? I'm working on, being more heart-led. I'm working on my own emotional resilience. But it also would really help to not have these foods right in front of me in this moment. And when we speak from our heart and we can identify our needs and our goals and that we're working towards something, it will be received in a very different way versus demanding change or criticizing or, just coming from a more heady place. Our lifestyle continues to deepen in this heart-led living way, which will really impact all aspects of our life and enable us to really step into a new reality, which is truly healthy, truly more fulfilling, more abundant, more loving, more compassionate, more peaceful. And this very much includes with the ways in which we eat. So if you are struggling with food cravings, please start by having some compassion for yourself, something I did not have for myself back then. It will start to help to dissolve some of the tightness and the stuckness around the issue in the first place and to allow you to connect to yourself more. And then please do use the power of your heart, which is inside of you, to change perceptions and patterns, which are based in the mind. They're based in the ego. They're based in ways in which we've been trying to cope, to survive, to self-soothe. And then we realize along the way that they are simply not serving us anymore. So we become compassionate. We pause as we start to get dysregulated, and we take some of these simple tools, breathing into the heart, slowing down to get coherent so that we can digest some of these bigger emotions. And the other practice we talked about today is to pause before we eat, to just clear any extra energies, to find a couple seconds, 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 1 minute of appreciation felt in the heart. Appreciation is one of the emotions in research found to not only be easier to access and self-generate, but to induce more coherence and more clarity. So it will allow us to be less susceptible to food cravings and to overeating and having far larger portion sizes than our bodies could actually utilize and benefit from. So I hope this gives you some really tangible, useful tips to start employing and using. I am here for you always. Please reach out. You can write into the show. You can write into the podcast. You can find me on social media @_ Kimberly Snyder. Please check out all our different resources as well as the show notes at mysaluna.com. I would love to hear from you as well. Please leave a review for the show, for our podcast, as well as for the new book. I'd love to hear your feedback. And I really am listening all the time. I will be back here as always Monday for our next interview show. Until then, take great care of yourself and sending you so much love from my heart to yours.